Okay, time particle theory, cycle of light, take 2. This is a particle. You see it in quantum. This is the center of the particle. It's a meter 4. It's a bending moment occurring right at the very center of the particle. It's an infinitesimal dot point, but nonetheless it exists. And it's a bending moment at the center of carbon. There's a piece of mass at the center of every particle, and it is equally as infinitesimal as the dot, because it is the dot. It's the dot expanding as fast as it can go, and it creates an effect as it moves. So at particle scale, we go from m4, the space of a second created inside the particle where it shouldn't exist. It should exist out here in infinite space. Yeah. Infinite time, beg your pardon. So time has appeared here in the middle, and it appears as light because this is light. So the light appears at the center where it doesn't belong. It races away as fast as it can possibly go. What speed does it go? The speed of light. And it reaches a velocity which creates C3. And the reason, and C3 is the area of this little ball of carbon that lies at the center. And it's interesting that it's the units are cubed. And this is the key. If the ratio of the diameter, if the diameter is pi exactly, 3.14159 in meters, then the ratio to the circumference, the units change from a square to a cubed. It's amazing. And so what that means is having a cube means that surface area has a thickness and a volume of thickness as described by the cube. So that's fairly complex, but I hope you can grab the understanding that it's simply a trick that geometry plays when pi is the ratio. So here we go, the cycle of light. Light moves to the surface. It creates lots and lots of effects. We'll come back to them. It leaves the carbon. The light leaves the carbon. As it does so, it's changed velocity here. It's lost momentum for a moment as it passed through this zone, which is where the vibration happens. Okay. When the vibration occurs, it slows for a moment and has an effect. It causes a tension in the light itself. And so what we're seeing here is that's the tension energy. Yeah? So the circle around it is the potential that tension can take, and that this represents the tension in the surface. Do you understand? So I could almost dash this circle at the moment to show it as that it doesn't yet exist. It's potential to exist. So nonetheless, here's the energy. So the first thing that happens is light leaves the surface, it becomes energy, it becomes nitrogen, a gas, and that the N represents the vector that the light is spinning, which is this direction, clockwise. You see the arrows pushing the tension? It's greater here than here, the angle. It will push it in this direction. So it's spinning clockwise. Nitrogen, a gas, has been created from the disruption here at the surface, and the gas is here at the surface. The next thing that happens is that the tension has an effect, and that effect causes a bending moment. And that bending moment has happened here, so that the area that was created here, this tiny infinitesimal dot point, is now, this represents the bending force that's inside there. And that you see the H bar, what that represents is the light expanding from the center. Oh, sorry, I'm shaking, it's exciting. From the center of the H, it's expanding that way and that way. And it gets to a point where it equals the tension that's been created by the nitrogen. You see, here's the tension the same. And that slows this expansion for a moment, and it transfers the bending moment to this zone, and it becomes real in terms of an actual entity of hydrogen. 2. So it's the half of water. It's the bending force and the 2, the energy, that's creating water at this next stage in the cycle. So it's created from the space, it's gone carbon, vibration, it's gone energy, tension, it's gone water, bending moment in an actual bubble of water. The next thing that happens is that bubble bursts. This expansion, this point of, this is pi, and this is the golden ratio of pi. It's fantastic. All the sacred geometry is created by these two, tension and bending. The next thing on the cycle is that the bubble attempts to burst and becomes zero. But in attempting to burst, it creates an energy here. Imagine that's the energy bursting out of the zero. The energy has not been lost, it's conserved, it's just been transferred. And just picture that this is occurring. I've shown the bubbles burning in terms of motion in time within the particle itself. But they're actually this size. Yeah? They're the bubbles themselves. So the bubble is expanding at it's accelerating again because it's slowed here. So we see it as accelerating speed of light, c squared. So that the oxygen here is actually this. It's the boundary of the particle and the boundary of our atmosphere. Because nature just replicates itself from quantum scale up to the infinite. And so the most useful one for ourselves is to view this as the construction of our atmosphere. Okay, so so we got to the 0 point. So that's half the light cycle described in terms of the energy being created and transferred to this point. At this point, it collapses. The energy has all been expelled, and there's the energy there now. Right? It's no longer in the center of the oxygen. All the energy has moved to the boundary. And it's a vibrating boundary of an EM wave, of course. Now, this zero, it's one bubble. It's a fully formed bubble with all the entities required, all the energy that it requires, all the sacred geometry, all the numbers are created in this moment. All the maths, the physics, the laws are all created in that energy moment. And now they become realized. So that the one bubble, as it begins to burst, the H becomes a 4, and that the bubble fully forms, H2O is formed. That the bending moment is realized in the surface tension. And it becomes a real tight bubble here of water. The next thing, that bubble attempts to contract. Again, it's still got an expanding force inside it, right? So it attempts to contract, it can't go anywhere. It just converts itself to nitrogen N3, 1, 2, 3. And there are real energies, and those real energies are then also in the bubble. So here's the EM waves being created, the magnetism, the electricity as we come through, and this is being created in the outside of the atmosphere. And then we come back to N3 goes to C2, C2, and I was wrong here, right? So this is on my first pass, this was important. So it goes from C2, goes to C2Q. So that the energy that was carried to here is the energy that made the action of the bending, it made the action of the tension, and it made the action on the surface. So the action, we've had energy, action at the surface. And the action is here, the quantum bubble. That's us. And that's where choice comes in, and evolution and all of that lovely, all that good stuff. And there it is, the God equation. Because you can see that the Q is the power, it's the higher power of c squared. And now you can see E equals mc squared. It's E equals mc squared to the power of Q. And what is the Q? It's us. And we live here on the surface, and so does all life, and all particles lives here manifesting. Yeah, we're just carbon with a bending moment inside of us that's pulling in the light from the outside, and the light flows through. So there you go. C2 equals C2, C squared to the Q equals C4. Okay, and C4 can bond with H in a covalent bonding at the surface, forming methane, greenhouse gas as you call it. Yeah. So there's one of your greenhouse gases. The other one that's happening is, of course, the carbon here is out of balance because H is too big now. It should be 2 pi. I'll put that down the bottom here, a little description of that, what's measured. So the measured value of H is 6.626, but that's a lie because there's the smoking gun that I'm going to talk about. And then it should be H bar, as they call it, reduced Planck's constant, 2 pi. That's the real value, and this is the natural or measured value of H, and it's wrong. And that's why everything's wrong. So we've got methane at the surface. We've got H being too big means that the diameter of this atmosphere is too big. And it will be too big across its dimension here, across the east-west axis, the strong force. So it will become in an ellipse. And so the planet will become elliptical, and the orbit will become elliptical, and everything, the whole solar system becomes elliptical. So there we are at the surface. Here we are back again. So c squared, here's our job. Yeah, there, to add the power there to the c squared, to make the c4, to create the bending inside of ourselves, where we see that light, and then that light is added and it does the light cycle. It's brilliant, isn't it? So everything you need is there. Pi, golden ratio, yeah, maths, physics, matter, gas, water, oxygen, life, evolution, meaning of life. And the answer is 42. Because it's the difference between the meter, pi meters times 10 to the 8, over h seconds times 10 to the minus 34. The difference between them is 40 fucking 2. There you go. If you want to know if this is true, surely that tells you this must be right and that the future's begun. Sorry about that was a lot of physics, my friends. Yeah, that's all you need to know, that exists. You don't even have to understand it. You just need to know that I do. And you need to know that I'm saying start nose breathing immediately. Never breathe through your mouth again. Evolve. It's today. The system has just collapsed. Look at my smoking gun video and demand the truth. Love rules. Do the work. Choose.